possible. Have a seat, Dr. Weir.
I apologize for the short notice, but we've had something come up that requires your immediate attention. Lyle.
At 0300 this morning, TDRS picked up an automated navigation beacon broadcasting at 2-minute intervals in Neptune orbit. This is a hard copy of the data.
This is incredible. These are the same coordinates before the ship disappeared. It's the event HORiZON. She's come back.
However, Houston wants to send a search and rescue team. Investigate the source of the transmission. If it really is the event HORiZON, they'll attempt to salvage. Now, we need you to prepare a detailed briefing on the ship's systems for the salvage crew.
With respect, Admiral, I have to go with them.
Dr. Weir, you have no experience with salvage procedure.
Look, you can't send a search and rescue team out there on their own and expect them to succeed. It'd be like sending an auto mechanic to work on the shuttle.
I fail to see how sending you would improve their chances.
I designed that ship. I put 14 years of research into that vessel. I spent the last 7 trying to work out what went wrong.
Your desire to redeem your reputation doesn't factor into this.
This isn't about my reputation. This isn't about me at all. The event HORiZON was created for one reason. You go faster than light. Without that, we can never reach new stars. We can never colonize new planets. Mankind's evolution will end here. 7 years ago, we didn't just lose a ship and a crew. We lost the dream. I have to go.
It's not that simple. Lyle, play the recording for Dr. Weir.
Navigation control tried to hail the vessel. This was the only response. Since that initial transmission, there's been no further contact.
Crew, could they still be alive?
Someone sent that message.
Admiral, you have to put me on that ship.
There was a terrific sequence that Andrew Kevin Walker wrote, who wrote Seven, and he came in at one point to do a polish on the screenplay. And he wrote this great sequence where the crew of the Lewis and Clark have just come through the airlock in the event HORiZON the first time, and they see everything floating in zero gravity. They see ice crystals, they see a wrench floating, they see a watch floating. And then Fishburne sees something, and he walks up to it. And it was framed, so he didn't quite know how big it was, because whatever it was in the foreground, and he was in the background. So he thought it was something quite big. But as he got closer and closer, he realized it was something quite small, until eventually he could get it in his fingers like that. And what you realized was, and Sam Neill and Joely were looking at it on the monitors, and Jason Isaacs were looking at it, trying to see what it was, and it was a tooth that had been ripped out by the root. So you had the tooth, you had the whole root of the tooth, and you had a bit of gum attached to it as well. So it's just like someone had ripped it out with a pair of pliers. And it was a truly disturbing image. But it took a long time to play that scene out. And it was one of the scenes that kind of bit the dust, and I was always very sorry about that. You know, because did it progress the plot at all? No, it didn't. And that's the reason why it came out as well, because the pressure was make the film shorter, get on with it. And it didn't progress the plot, which was the studio's reasoning for taking it out. For me, though, it was truly disturbing, and it kind of informed their exploration of the event, and I think would have unsettled the audience even more. Although, in retrospect, you know, the audience was so unsettled anyway. You know, they were terrified when our heroes were exploring the event HORiZON. But I feel that scene was one that we lost, that I always wanted to put back in again. The other scene that was heavily trimmed was what happened to the original crew of the event HORiZON. There was a whole kind of big, violent, kind of bloody orgy scene that was shot, where essentially the crew were they were having sex, but they were also murdering each other while they were doing it. So they're kind of like fucking each other to death, and And it was pretty bloody and unpleasant. And I was actually helped by another filmmaker friend of mine who's another director who came in to direct Second Unit a couple of times, called Vadim Jean, who's probably know from, like, he's done a lot of kind of romantic comedies like Leon the Pig Farmer, but he clearly has a dark side to him, because when I brought him in, because, you know, I'd started shooting these sequences and then I kind of ran out of time. I had to go back to the main unit. So he came in and he shot a lot of the kind of violent, orgiastic scenes.
This is a slightly extended and again slightly more bloodthirsty cut of Fishburne discovering Jason Isaacs' body in the medical bay. The main changes are we did some close-ups in the medical tables. The reason why we made the tables mirrored was actually to accommodate this shot, where you see his intestines laid on the table and then a reflection of his body hanging. And actually for that reflection shot of Jason Isaacs, it was actually Jason who we hung up there, because I was worried that the body sculpt that we'd built wouldn't hold for the close-up. Actually, Jason also asked whether he could have his body afterwards, the big mannequin with the insides flayed open, to take home with him. We told him he was very sick and that he couldn't keep it. So this is from an earlier version of the cut, actually, I think from the second version of the movie that we tested. And this weir coming down the ladder like a spider, upside down, was always one of my favorite images. We took it out because it was probably felt to be a little too kind of bloody. The movie was very, very bloody, as you can probably tell, even in the release version. I remember at one point, someone at the studio asked, is there a chance we could make the movie PG-13? And which, of course, we never could do. And we weren't trying to as well, but we were just trying to kind of get the right balance without tipping the movie also into an NC-17. We Are Coming Down the Ladder Upside Down, though, was always one of my my favorite images, so it's nice to see it back. It was kind of a little inspired by the deleted scene from The Exorcist as well, where you have the little girl coming down the stairs kind of as a weird spider shape, and we wanted to kind of like reference that in some way. This, again, is from the second tested version of the movie. Ultimately, the version we released was the third test. We tried something different at the end of the movie on this one, which is we didn't have Weir come back at the end. We made the end of the movie all be about Fishburne's confrontation with Edmund Corrick, who's the man he'd originally abandoned several years ago and left to burn when he had to close the life bay doors on his old spaceship. So he always felt the guilt for abandoning Edmund Corrick, even though he had no real choice. To save the rest of his crew, he had to let one man die. And we thought we'd try an ending of the movie that really focused on that, was all about his guilt with Edmund Corrick, and made the movie more specifically about these people, the crew of the event HORiZON and the crew of the Lewis and Clark, having to deal with the return of their sins and being tormented by what were their sins or what they perceived as being their guilts and their sins. What you'll see is kind of an incomplete version. We kept the Burning Man pretty much for all of it. You'll see he transforms into Weir at one point, but in the version we tested, we actually mapped flames and bloody skin onto Weir, so he appeared to be the Burning Man. Obviously, there's a lot of flames missing from the Burning Man here. We've been unable to locate, unfortunately, all of that footage. It's one of the interesting things about Event is it was really done, obviously, before the DVD revolution. So there was no real attempt to kind of keep all of this material because there was no real avenue for it to be released. And when it came to the point where we started looking for kind of doing a new version of the movie, we literally had to go all over the world to kind of look for offcuts from the film, negative from the film. A lot of the film was being stored in a salt mine in Transylvania, of all places. Now, this is an extended version of the Visions of Hell. Again, unfortunately, the footage only exists as video, but it gives you an idea of a kind of much more kind of bloody and violent cut. I'm really proud of a lot of this imagery. We really spent a lot of time shooting it. We really wanted to compose each of the individual images so that they looked like a painting, so that when you freeze framed, it really looked very painterly. Each individual frame was a beautiful, beautiful image. And that was the whole point, was to make the beauty and the horror kind of blend. This is also a slightly extended version of the fight scene between the Burning Man and Fishburne. Again, this was all going to be the Burning Man. It wasn't going to be Weir. And we altered his appearance with visual effects. It was all a little temporary, though. We never finished them because this was the second test of the movie. And although we'd made quite a few changes, the second test pretty much got the same results as the first test. What we discovered was the first version of the movie was very, very long because of the speed in which we'd done the cut. We didn't have very long to cut it. And we tightened it up for the second version, and we changed the ending as well. And I think people preferred the cut of the movie in the bulk of the movie from the second version, but they definitely preferred the ending from the first version. So for the third version, which was ultimately the release version, we went back to having Weir arrive at the end of the movie, which is really the right thing because, you know, by this point you want to kind of identify with Sam Neill's character a little bit and his journey in the movie and what ultimately he's become. Also, the dialogue in this version is much more specific in terms of hell and damnation and sins. It's kind of like, we always called it the Old Testament cut. And I prefer the version of the movie we ultimately ended up releasing where it's just a little more vague. We don't kind of like refer to hell so specifically. I think it's kind of clear, but I think it's cooler that we don't have to actually talk about it. This is kind of interesting seeing some of the green screen work before all the visual effects were added.